at 16 hours.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the session on the universities and their adaptation strategies. And if you can hear me, please raise your hand to those of you of my panelists who are with me here online. Can I just say hello? Hello, everyone. Wonderful to have you with us. So this session is special because as any organ, as any community, universities goes enormous for me. Of a researcher turned entrepreneur, of a policy advisor, and then as an investor bringing in the link between science and business. Now, today, everything is different and everything is quite exciting. And this is not to say that it's easy, but in times of crisis, there's always an opportunity to get things done that could not be done before because of the system inertia, because of the price are an integral part of. Now, let me ask you the question, the following. In the morning session of our expert group, which advises Commissioner Gabriel and the DGRTD and other directorates on the key agenda of people, planet, discuss our paper. Advocate every member of them should help to defend those who need to be defended. Prepare those who need to be prepared. Controversy. How to get a job done. And this is my key question to our fantastic panelists. We will speak from the perspective of universities, perspective of university leadership. And I welcome Professor Sylvia Schweiksterger from the Lund University. I welcome Franziska Martins, the voice of students from University of Toronto. Welcome Paul is our professor from Stanford University, from University in Barcelona, and former president of the Sylvia, who they pursue policy advise governments on sustainability.
Daria, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we're having really hard time hearing you.
What you is, if you had a magic and could for the universe. Okay, try to do something. How is it now? So if I ask
again,
with
Daria,
technical problems, if you could take over being the moderator of the session.
Yes. Okay. I will. I'm happy to do that, Daria. Sorry to everyone in the panel and in the audience. As you can tell, we're having a bit of some technical problems. I hope you can hear me okay.
Can you hear me now?
Do you want to try again, Daria?
Let's try. So my question to you is, if you had a magic wand, do you have a magic wand? Can you put your thumbs up so I can know that you hear me? Who has a magic wand? Sylvia, Paul? Okay. We seem to have the technical difficulties. reversing the order and starting with yourself. We're talking on a lot of universities could help with their changing role to be a new member of this ecosystem and help unpack the tensions between people and prosperity. Okay.
Okay. Sorry, Daria. I think we're going to try and try this. I'm going to take over temporarily because we have a really hard time hearing you. So just to be repetitive, you can hear me clearly. Okay, great. So then, without further ado, as Daria has been trying to say, and she has a very clear notion of what this panel should be, and I think it is an excellent notion. It's the idea that we're living in an age of transformation, an age of crisis and uncertainty. And the question is whether how universities will position themselves in this age that we're living in. And so for that reason, we've assembled this panel, and we're very excited and hoping to have a lively discussion, and we're looking also forward to the questions from the audience. I think I was supposed to start, but I don't know if that's the right thing for me to do since I'm moderating. So maybe we should just change it and just start by giving Franziska Martens the first round of comment. And I'm going to ask everybody to very briefly introduce themselves and make a 3-minute opening statement. Go ahead, Franziska.
Thank you, Sylvia. I hope everyone can hear me okay. Okay, good. I'm Franziska Martins. I'm from Portugal. I'm a medical student, a 4th-year medical student. And I was asked to speak on behalf of students and young researchers. So it is pretty obvious for everyone that there is anxiety about this fall term like there was no other. But instead of lamenting what we lost, let us focus on what we've gained with this COVID-19 crisis. Many of the adjustments made to teaching and learning, student engagement, and research to adapt to COVID-19 have shown us the way to a better version of higher education. Teachers and faculty have been very dedicated to adapting to the crisis, so the students could still benefit from classes and not feel like they are falling behind, or that they will be less prepared when they graduate than their older colleagues. Doing all of this, they created this close connection, this feeling of mutual understanding and empathy between students and faculty that did not exist before, or at least it was very minimal. The future the students deserve can be fashioned by heeding the lessons learned from the experience over the past few months. So speaking from this experience, I always felt like I was lacking the discussion and the necessary face-to-face activities to really assimilate the content I was being taught, even with the online reading materials that all the teachers made available. So for the future, the better opportunity we had and the better possibility would be a blended learning model, one where learning proceeds seamlessly between a physical or a virtual classroom, depending on how COVID crisis continues from today on, and a continuously refreshed online resource library built with open access resources. And I know someone else in this panel is going to talk about open access resources, so I'm just going to leave it there for now, leave it hanging in the air for you all to remember. That way, instructors would not individually create new versions of the course each year, which means they would be free to mentor each student on a challenge-based learning. And that has been proven to be the way students learn the best, by being challenged. Even before the pandemic started, only a fraction of the students made use of the wide range of curricular and extracurricular learning opportunities offered on campus. Now, to overcome these constraints posed by distancing, scheduling, and convenience, all of these learning opportunities are provided online, a template that bodes well for supplementing future face-to-face engagement. We as students and young researchers are learning to create solutions that mitigate the social and economic impact of the virus. And as we become more involved in addressing the complexity of the pandemic, we are also being trained to address other seemingly intractable challenges like climate change, clean water, affordable housing, widespread rapid transit, and cybersecurity, for example. So this COVID-19 might seem like a really bad thing, but it opened many doors for us, especially as students, to make learning better, to make the teaching better, to create better relationships with our teachers and faculty. And what this pandemic has is the power to humble us all and open our eyes and ears in new ways, ways we never thought possible before. We have been disoriented and forced to listen, empathize, and fully imagine how to serve the needs of others and our own needs, but at the same time, working together with faculty members, with other students to overcome any and all challenges we face. Faculty, supported by offices of teaching and learning, are finding new ways to weave students' concerns into course design, and I sincerely hope they continue to listen carefully as they design curricula for the future, and they keep teaching us the same way and in a better way than we were taught during the COVID-19 crisis. We learned a lot from that, but this year is going to be critical for teaching in the future. Let's say this year is the trial year. Whatever challenges we faced before, we are going to face them this year, and hopefully now we can overcome them in a good way. Thank you. I'll pass the word back to Sylvia.
Thank you so much, Francisca. I think you did an excellent job in being very constructive about where I think you see significant room for improvement and where you see the crisis as a good catalyst for bringing about the change that you would like to see. So I think we should come back to that. With that, I hand over to Paul. Please introduce yourself, Paul, and I believe that you will continue in that vein.
Thank you very much. I want to make sure that everybody can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Is the audio okay? Great, terrific. Thank you very much, Sylvia, and thanks for stepping in as a moderator. My name is Paul Marca, and I currently serve as Associate Vice Provost for the Office of the Vice Provost for Teaching and Learning at Stanford. My role is really to connect Stanford and industry. We've built many programs since 1969 as a unit, the Stanford Center for Professional Development. And as part of that effort, we have built the first master's degree online in 1996, the first program blending non-credit material certificate programs in 1999. And so we've been at this online learning for many years. Our focus as Stanford in connecting with industry is really to try to change and make the world a better place. As new roles like data science and artificial intelligence become actual jobs, we believe that it's incumbent on universities to bridge the university and industry to retrain and retool these potentially former graduates so that they become vibrant and we sustain a community. I want to maybe focus my remarks on pre-COVID, during COVID, which we're now, and perhaps post-COVID, make some predictions. During the pre-COVID times, as a unit, our work was to try to build online education programs, graduate and professional offerings. And we saw between 10 to 20% of the faculty interested in engaging with us. The rest really wanted to focus on the residential students and or their research. During COVID, we went from 10 to 20% to 100% of faculty and students taking online courses. And I think Francisca makes a great point. We were learning. It was like guerrilla warfare with technology working sometimes and sometimes not. And I think the post-COVID era, I see a number of both tactical things that we need to do and huge considerations for universities that really start to emerge. The tactical things are, how can we get better? How can we work with those 80% of faculty who are unfamiliar to improve their effort so that they can not only educate those students on the campus, but also potentially reach out to industry. I think something that, especially in Europe, is a great opportunity. The second thing that I see is I think that the notion of place-based education, it potentially is dead. I'll be controversial here. What if universities were to go away? Universities are a combination of people who are qualified, faculty, and students who come together to build a community. But I think this COVID era has disrupted the notion of community. We can get online and create just as rich an experience. And so my big challenge question is sort of how can we reimagine the university role, not just as a 4 or 8 year degree, but rather a 50 or 60-year degree? Because the big trends that I see, one, the jobs are changing rapidly. So it's no longer the case you can get trained for 4 to 8 years and be relevant even 5 years after you graduate. The second is industry is starting to build their own programs to educate their own people. They don't need universities. And third, government funding is drying up for these universities. So how can we start to reimagine the notion of a university as a place, as a time, rather than a university as a time in your life? What about a university for a lifetime? Thinking about extending and expanding to the professional audience, those who will need retraining to remain, to have communities remain vibrant. So Sylvia, I'll hand it back to you. I hope that I've been a little bit controversial as the guy from the university that prides itself on innovation and entrepreneurship.
Thanks a lot, Paul. I think that was an excellent, let's let that phrase linger. What if universities are dead? I think that's a good way to motivate us to have an interesting discussion. And thanks for pointing out to some interesting challenges, but also opportunities that might lie ahead. With that, I'd like to turn to Josep Pique. Could you also introduce yourself and then make your points?
Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you, everyone. And also the possibility to be in connection with Paul, and not connection with the same ideas, but I will reckon with some of your ideas. But following your line that we had a pre-COVID life, remember, we were living in pre-COVID, and now we're living in the COVID and thinking in the post-COVID. We have to know that the university, we have really 3 functions. The first one is education. As Francisca was explaining, we are doing innovation in education, but we have the function of research. Research for what? And applying for what we believe the universities. But in any case, nowadays in COVID times, we understand that we have a new challenge, COVID, and perhaps the research must be focused on the challenge that we have now on the table. But at the end of the day, the 2 functions, education, output talent, and research, output technology, are in order to serve. To serve who? Because following your idea, Paul, we are a community, but we are a community for us. A community for what? We are an ivory tower that we are, living alone, and we are a community for serving. We are a serving machine. But serving machine for who? And that's the moment when we need to understand very well that innovation means challenges. If we don't know what challenges we have, we cannot start innovation, because the challenge could be two natures, the nature of what problems we have, but also what opportunities. Usually problems are coming from the demand side. Usually opportunities are coming from the technology side, from the science technology push. But at the end of the day, we have to understand how can we serve our communities in the social dimension and economic dimension, also the environmental dimension, in order to, and also the health dimension, in order to serve our communities. But perhaps the challenge that we have as a university is that we have to agree that the second function, research, and the first one, education, must be added by the function of knowledge to use or impact. At the end of the day, how can we measure, but also how can we be responsible for the impact? And we know, at the end of the day, my person, Josep Pique, at La Salle Barcelona Science Park, I have been the president of ISP, the International Association of Science Park, 400 science parks in the world, very close of the universities, using the science part as a tool for impacting, as a tool for transferring technology through new technology-based startups, because we know that what's next is coming from new startups. Why new startups? Because they are the machine, the small machine for discovering, the small machine for discovering what's the new product, what is the new business model, what is the new job. This is a machine of finding new jobs. And at the end of the day, we agree, and I agree with you, if you don't mind, that we are a machine of entrepreneurial universities. This is not just universities. Entrepreneurial university means that we are responding, and we are the responsible for transforming our economy and society with government, industry, but also understanding that we have the challenges of the society and the challenges of the environment. That's the reason why I talk about the triple, quadruple, and quintuple helix. We are part of an ecosystem, but we are not just serving. We are just contributing, and we are creating packs of innovation. We are creating packs. What I say pack of innovation means that we have to agree with the rest of the agents at the end of the day of the society, what vision and what challenge, because without vision means that we don't know where to go. Vision is the starting point of the strategy. Challenges are the bridge between our reality and where we want to go. My last words are about how important is that we, the universities, we have to agree that if we use and take advantage of people like Francisca, that is now, she's a student and she could be an entrepreneur, and we put all the students of our universities in Europe, like entrepreneurs, like you do, Paul, in Stanford, we will transform our economy and we will transform our society.
Thank you very much, Josep. Would you want to say very briefly, introduce yourself? I think you forgot that in the heat of the moment.
I'm sorry, I was there for Josep Piqué, working at La Salle Technova. I'm the president of my university park, it's a technology park, but also I have been president of ISP, the International Association of Science Parks. It's a 400 science parks around the world, working in technology transfer and creation of new technology-based startups.
Great. Thank you, Josep. I think you, again, also raised some very interesting points about the question of community. You know, what community are we talking about, and how is academia its own community, or how does it fit into a wider community? And then you also raised some interesting points about how we need to serve the wider community as academics. And I think it'll be interesting to get some maybe thoughts also from the audience, because, you know, one of the common responses to that is that there's also this balance with academic freedom. So I think it would be really interesting. And with that, I'd like to encourage the people in the audience to feel free to pose questions on the question and answer stream. With that, I'd like to hand over to Céline. Go ahead, Céline.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you. My name is Sylvia Schweiksterger. I'm the executive director of a sustainability think tank called the Institute for European Environmental Policy. And I'm here because I work at the interface between science and policy in Brussels. So I think what we saw with the COVID crisis was a huge expectation on the part of the public. If you look at polls, scientists are still by far, even though I think some of the confidence in science has been eroded, the most trusted members of society. And society needed answers, and they needed answers very quickly, and sometimes too quickly for science to be catching up. And decision makers also had huge expectations on sciences. They just said, okay, we have this science committee and they'll tell us what to do. In a way, we saw this epic clash between the ethics of science, of conviction, and of responsibility. And I'm afraid that this is not just the heat of the moment. Now that we move to the next period of the crisis, or the next phase, so to speak, the expectation is still the same, that science will provide answers and academics and universities would be at the center. And one of the expectations of politicians right now, but also of the public, is about helping to unpack the tensions between caring for people, caring for the planet well, protecting prosperity in a period where you have recession. And obviously, if you look at it from the point of view of a politician right now, they are being asked, well, should I cut research budgets so that I support unemployment schemes? You know, so there are many different difficult calls that decision makers need to make. So I see 5 challenges for university to help unpack those tensions between the 3 Ps. The first one is, and it's very clear now in Horizon Europe, we need more directionality in research. And can universities become mission-oriented? And I know it's a difficult dilemma for university. In the case of ESIR, we believe that the mission, the moonshot, so to speak, is to allow people to live well within planetary boundaries. And that means looking at a fundamentally new research agenda. And within that, how do you unpack the tensions? Obviously, we have the SDG framework, and that is very useful, Could you have the universality principle, indivisibility, leaving the one behind? But once you've said that, you still need practical tools to help decision makers and help society make those decisions. When there are synergies, it's easy, but obviously when there are dilemmas, to help inform the debate so decisions can be made within the time frame that is needed. Because my next point is around time frame. We have now about a decade to flatten the curve of emissions. We see a great acceleration because of the pressure of the media, but also because multiple crises. You cannot say, I'll respond in 5 years while the crisis is alive. So we feel we need to start almost with deployment in terms of research, experiment live with rapid feedback loops to address this acceleration of time. That also means that research questions in terms of reference need to be framed differently. We need to have different disciplines working together. We need to integrate methods and knowledge from different disciplines, but we also need to confront academia with non-academic actors and society at large. We need a co-created agenda that looks at all those different dimensions. Another element is genuine engagement of the world of universities, which sometimes see themselves as the proprietor and the holder of knowledge, and see other stakeholders like NGOs, the private sector, trade unions, churches, communities, local authorities as transmission gears of their ideas. Instead, we need to see those other stakeholders as co-creators of innovation. The final dilemma or challenge, so to speak, is that I think because citizens expect so much from science, we also need to make sure that universities work on their social accountability frameworks. How will we be able to show, as the knowledge sector, that we have used public funds or private funds in a way that truly delivers for well-being of citizens? And how do we make sure that we walk the talk, that the world of university also confronts its own problem and its own dilemmas between people, planet, and prosperity? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Celine. This was very good, these points that you highlighted. And I think maybe to sum up this first round, what I hear you all talking about is, I think what's underlying all of your points is that we are sort of at a point of transformation or at a point of rupture where we need to think about how universities will position themselves, how they will organize themselves, and how they will serve their communities going forward. Maybe just to complete this round, I forgot to introduce myself. So my name is Sylvia Schweiksterger. I'm a professor in research innovation policy, and I'm currently deputy vice chancellor at the University of Lund. And I think this panel fits together very well because I returned to academia after 20 years in policymaking because I saw many of the things that you were highlighting. That is, how do we engage with communities? How do we renew education, which I think Francisca is talking about? How do we figure out how to use these digital tools that we're now discovering, although they're not very new, but going forward, as Paul said, and how can we be truly disruptive in using them? And then as you talked about, Josep, about how are we taking on, and also Celine, how are we taking on these real life and highly urgent challenges that we're facing right now, where simply speaking, we don't really have the time to invest in a 10-year research program and then hope that when that is done, there will be in 15 years a renewal of our curricula, and maybe in 20 years some interesting solutions. So I think this is one of the essential questions that we're facing right now. I would like to just remind you, please post questions in the Q&A. And while we're trying to look at what questions are coming in, I would like to just get a quick round from you. You've all hinted at certain problems regarding education, regarding engagement with society, as Celine mentioned, regarding serving communities, directionality of research, but perhaps also, as Paul sort of is suggesting, maybe radically rethinking what a university is or should be. So what do you see perhaps as what would be the most important thing if you, as Daria, who unfortunately couldn't moderate our panel, said before when we started, if you had a magic wand, if you were in a position to make some fundamental changes, what would you focus on? And perhaps also, what do you think universities should be worried about right now? I would also just like to add, Paul was mentioning that, we see a decline in government funding. I think one of the interesting things we see right now is that we see a differentiation of university models. We have the continental European public research university model, which has not, in a way, fortunately, but perhaps also from a change perspective, not always only positive, has not been suffering from the same drop in government funding as the American or the British universities. So, is that something you would like to comment on? So I think we see sort of a divergence or a diversion that the different university models in different countries are starting to diverge a little bit. And I guess the jury's out which one, will rise to the top at the end. So just a few points, maybe. If you could change something, what would you focus on? What would you be worried about if universities as an institution were your headache? And just if you could say a little bit more, so let's just do a quick round, and we'll start perhaps with Celine and go work our way back. So just a brief answer while we're kicking off the discussion.
Well, in my experience, because before working for a think tank, I was a campaign director of Oxfam, and large-scale change always needs a community of people who get close enough from different perspectives and innovate together and have huge trust. So if I had a magic wand, I would want that in spite of virtuality, we can have this trust, which unfortunately, as human beings, comes from physical contact, physical presence, those moments at the coffee machine where you can just talk a little bit freely. So that would be what I would be doing.
Thank you, Celine. Let's move to Josep.
Okay, yes. In my case, let me focus again in the concept of entrepreneurial university. I believe that if persons like Francisca, we create a generation of entrepreneurs, student entrepreneurs and research entrepreneurs, we will not have not only unemployment, we have a new jobs in the future. That's the reason why my focus is more and more to follow the programs like do Stanford and Berkeley with, the ICORS program is a program that the students are trying to discover what's next. Discovering what's next means that you are the source of fresh people that are trying to discover where the technology is inside the product or service, and somebody will pay for that or will use for that. For this reason, I feel that to promote an entrepreneurial universities movement, including new indicators, not only how many papers or how many students, how many startups, how many jobs are creating these startups, how many investment are receiving those startups. We have a new pool of indicators that will send a new message, because if the only message is the number of students or the number of papers, we will not have sensors for checking what is the new role of the university.
Thank you, Josep. Please go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, so I think this COVID disease is terrible. It's been tremendously impactful across the globe. I think if there's one silver lining, it's actually been that we've had to question everything. The universities are now digitally transforming their entire operations. Stanford did it in a couple of weeks. But what I see is much more problematic. And I see universities doing their own thing, focusing on how to just survive. I see governments not funding to the tune that research will diminish. And I see industry building its own education programs. And if you take those three big blocks, universities, governments, and industry, my big hope is that this COVID disease has forced us to start to ask questions, to really try to connect those three players that are so critical for a future state, a planet that will survive and live, industry and fulfilling jobs, and so on. And I see those three entities separating in ways that are not productive. So how might we connect those, have a candid and open dialogue around that? That would be my one hope.
Excellent, Paul. Thank you very much. And I think that's emerging from most of your comments, is that actually from the point of universities, perhaps in some ways this crisis could be a catharsis or a useful rebirth if we use it constructively. Franziska.
Well, since university is right now my headache, if I had a magic wand, I think I would use it to completely change the learning methods used nowadays. I think the way teachers want to teach and students want to learn are not the same nowadays. I think changing to a challenge-based mentoring would go with what Giuseppe said. It would create more entrepreneurs, people with more curiosity about the future. It would make people try to not just educate themselves to get a degree so they can get into the market. They would want to discover more and have more knowledge and challenge themselves. If we have a system that's constantly challenging the students and constantly asking questions, students themselves will start asking themselves questions, start questioning the system, start questioning everything around them. And that is one of the reasons nowadays we have the society the way it is, because some young people started asking the question, why are the governments not doing anything to help with climate change? That would be my 3 cents. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Franziska. I think excellent comments. So what I hear you say is that this is really an opportunity to fundamentally rethink how universities engage with the society around them. I think also in a way to also rethink this perhaps social contract that academia has with society, with industry, with government, about what we think we can and want to deliver, and what kind of requirements we need for that. And as Celine, I think, also said, and Franziska, there is a huge interest, a genuine interest. It's right now in helping universities serve their communities better long term. So I think we can benefit from that genuine interest, because science has become very, it's high in demand in this COVID crisis. And then, as Franziska mentioned, and this is something I've been personally working a lot with, how do we need to reform learning, and what kind of curricula and what kind of content and format of learning do we need to think about, including what Paul was talking about, like the 60-year curriculum, which is that you don't just engage in a 4-year degree and then you're done. So I think these are all really relevant points you've raised. I would just add one, and then I have one question
Sylvia,
here from the audience.
If I may, only
Yes.
one question.
Absolutely.
Let me take advantage of the words of Franziska, because at the end of the day, knowledge is a tool. The goal is the challenge. And the challenge means if Franziska and the students are understanding that the problems of their world, of our world, or their community, because you don't have to fly to the world, also you have challenge in if they have the knowledge as a tool for serving, at the end for solving the problems of, that's the moment when you have the engagement of the knowledge. That's the reason why I believe, and we have, my institution, La Salle, is a global institution. We have universities around the world, in Philippines, in Mexico, in Barcelona, in Madrid, and also schools around the world. The engagement of the students in Palestine or in Egypt or in Barcelona is the same when they believe that they can transform their reality. But if you want to transform, you have to know what you want to transform, because could be a social dimension, could be a food dimension, could be the goals of the United Nations. That's the moment, from my point of view, that is important. But let me go beyond that.
Very briefly, briefly, Joseph, because we have a question. Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the second step is the startups. The tool of the startups are the more fast tool that we have in our ecosystems. We have startups in our university, in the science part of the world, that in 2 weeks, they can develop a pilot. In 2 weeks. They don't have to wait 1 year, 5 years. That's a good thing, that we have to use the startups as a tool. But the startups, technology-based startups, also using student resources and so on. Yes, that's all. Sorry,
Thank
Sylvia.
you.
But I want to react.
No problem. Absolutely, no problem. Thank you. We have a very good question that's come in, which is the following. The University of Leuven ranks always as one of the most innovative universities globally, despite being 600 years old. Is it intellectual assets? Is it research-driven education? Is it groundbreaking research or valorization? Is it management or a combination? So the question is, I guess, what is Leuven's recipe to success, if that's how we want to define that? Would anybody like to take on that question? And
okay,
while we all
I can take it.
Yes.
I can take it. Okay.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
It's a very good question. So thank you to whoever posted it. Staying at the #1 spot, even though the university is very old, it means that it is listening to everyone inside it. It means that researchers, students, teachers, anyone who works there is being listened to. It's not just the management, it's not just the intellectual assets, it's not just the research. They manage to combine everything into one and slowly work their way up. You don't just become the #1 most innovative university globally from night to day. You have to set up a strategy and decide what you need to do. If you are the most innovative university, it means you mostly are research driven. But to do that, you need to consider everything else, because if you fall behind on anything, it won't work as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Franziska. I would say very wise words, I think, coming from somebody who's not been in academia for so long. I think that's some excellent points. I can no longer see Paul, so if he wants to say something, you have to make yourself known otherwise. Would anybody briefly like to also comment on what Franziska said or the question? But while I wait, I think you made an excellent point, Franziska, is that this is not something that comes overnight, and I think it also requires a long-term commitment to excellence, more so than perhaps being the #1, right? You have to. It's about really thinking about what your essence is.
Perhaps if I may, yes, understanding that the universities, we have two elements. We are a local agent in order to connect with the local ecosystem, but we're a global hub of talent and research. These two levels are very interesting because at the end of the day, if we use the university as a platform for landing international or local people for our communities, but also for sending our young people to the world, that's when you have the two elements of the university, a local engagement, but also a global engagement. That's the reason why we have to remember science is global for definition. The scientific method is global. Everyone in every paper rating that could be rated from any place, if it's accepted from the science, it means it's a global science. You can create a global science, and you can, but the challenge is not only to create, it's also to distribute, to make the technology transfer to adapt to your reality. That reason, perhaps the Leuven University is a good, because 600 years old means 600 years of connections, of a path of doing research, but also to connect with other teams and to have the mobility of talent, but also the mobility of research, and why not the mobility of new technology-based startups.
Thank you, Josep. I like the term 600 years of connections. I think that's a very important point. Speaks also to the issue of trust that Celine was talking about. I will move to this question. Another question that came in that is the following. Does a switch to blended learning or to 100% virtual learning at the more extreme end undermine universities' value proposition? Do speakers think students would be willing to pay full sticker price for blended or fully virtual learning in the long term?
Okay, I can go first again.
I think that, yes.
Actually, I do. Not just because of the things we are going through right now, but when you think about it, there are online universities, there are online courses, and people do actually pay nowadays so they can have, let's say, and not undermining anything, but they do pay price so they can have a little bit of paper saying, I took this online course and now I know this and this and that. I have friends of mine, again, I'm in a medical university. I have friends of mine who have paid for traditional Chinese medicine courses online. They have an interest in that and they pursue that interest. So if there will be willing to pay full sticker price? Yes, they will, but it will also depend on the kind of course that it is. You can't ask a medical student to pay the full price saying, oh, you're only gonna be learning online, no contact with the patient, no contact with anything, you're gonna be learning just with simulations. I think it will depend a little bit on the kind of course, but mostly, yes, I think people will be willing to pay full price for virtual or blended learning.
Thank you, Francisca. We see that Paul is back. Would you like to, is that your view too on this question?
Francisca, I'm going to disagree just a little bit. I think you're right. There's an amazing amount of volume and content online that you can access, and I think that the students and society is better for it. I do believe that we're in an age of commoditized education, and so everything that you can possibly imagine can be Googled, and you can take a course on it, from pottery to environmental sciences to entrepreneurship, and I think. This means that universities, as place-based education, need to reevaluate their value. They need to determine how, given this commoditization of education, what areas of expertise do we need to focus? How can we create a community that will be the best of the situation? And how can we create on-ramps and off-ramps for students like you, Francisca? 5 years from now, you'll maybe have an entirely new job. How can I re-engage with the university community, do some online work, have an experience on campus for the hands-on demonstration and lab activity? I think universities fundamentally need to rethink how they operate and what they're doing, and I think COVID now is the accelerant to do so.
Sylvia, if I may, or
thanks
perhaps,
a lot, Paul.
Celine.
Yeah.
Celine,
yeah, let's take exactly. Thank you. Go ahead, Celine.
Well, I think we should definitely have a blended model, because, as we said, learning is also about, obviously dialogue. It's about context. It's about connecting with other stakeholders, and I think it provides a huge opportunity, because at the moment many universities were very insular. By the time you had gone through your courses, you had talked with all your colleagues, etc., you had no time necessarily to engage with externals. And I certainly see it in my job. There are fewer internal meetings, and people have actually more time to engage with others, also because you don't spend the time in transfer station that you used to. So I think let's also look at the opportunity that this provides to offer other experiences of connection, and using universities as virtual hubs that bring all those stakeholders together, in addition to what is the more traditional form of learning.
Thank you, Celine. You want to add something quickly, Josep?
Yes, it's in this line, in this vein of Celine. We have, for instance, in my university, we put all the classrooms are TV plateaus. It means that the student can choose to be physically or virtually, because at the end of the day, we are not thinking about the machine or the technology. We're thinking about the class as a community of learning. That's the key point. You can be in distance, you can be in the same classroom, you can commute, or more than that, sometimes you cannot come to the classroom, but this is the classroom because it's a community of learning. And at the end of the universities are clusters of talent, because we are sharing knowledge and we are sharing network. And that's perhaps the reason why I believe that we will have future as a university, because we are platforms of talent. The challenge here is not to repeat the pre-COVID times. As Celine is talking about, we can use this platform also for inviting Paul to be a visiting professor for my university, because at the end of the day, we have these tools that can really leverage what we were doing in the past. But at the end of the day, my understanding is learning is a community of learning. It means that we have to think not only about one student, we have to think about a class, people that are learning together and are growing, because at the end of the day, they will be alumni, and they will come back to the university as a professors, or will be donors, or whatever they can be. That's the reason why I feel that the concept of community is something that we don't have to miss.
Thank you very much. I think we've touched upon a lot of different issues. Right now, I don't see any more questions in the Q&A. So while I'm waiting to see if any more are coming in, I'd like to sort of ask you maybe to reflect as we now approach, I think, slowly the end of our session. But I'd like to ask you, about this notion, because you've talked about a lot about trust, community building, engagement. Céline has talked about the tendencies perhaps for universities to become inward looking. Do you think that so one thing that occupies me a lot, and I'm going to approach it from a very personal perspective, you know, I was brought up in Europe, but I got my university education in the States, and I can honestly say that the education I received in the States is one of the best experiences I've had in my life. So what I reflect upon a lot is what gave me that experience, what provided the conditions. And I think Paul was touching upon it. We're dealing with certain issues, forces like is competition with other education providers, or competition among universities important? Or is it important that you provide stable long-term funding options, which is one of the things I think we are trying to do in many countries in Europe, which I think is also important for breakthrough research. So this is an open question to you. You know, where do you see the European universities going forward? You know, where do you see their strengths and their challenges? That's something I think which will be extremely important for all the challenges that we're trying to address. And since we are at the European RNI Days, I'd like you to reflect on that. I have, as we're speaking now, also, so if you can hold that thought, we also have some questions coming in. But could we do one quick round of that, sort of, where do you see the European universities in the global context? You know, what will drive their ability to serve their communities, to do groundbreaking research, and to provide, you know, stimulating education, which I think is something you've been trying to point out, Franziska, and relevant education for the society of the future. Anybody would like to start? Céline.
Well, I think universities in Europe have a huge opportunity. It's called the Green Deal. You know, contrary to the United States, contrary to China, we are clear in Europe where we want to go. And we also have stable funding. We also have a rapidly changing regulatory framework and policy framework, which will, you know, create demand for innovation and research. So to me, I think, you know, this moonshot is really for European universities, and they have all the means to try and grab it. And obviously they should also try to collaborate with others. But, you know, I think they have a huge opportunity presented by the Green Deal and the new agenda of Horizon Europe.
Thank you. And we have two relevant questions coming in. So quick, anybody else want to respond to mine, or is that a hopeless, if it's not a hopeless question? Or would you like to move on?
If I could jump in, Sylvia. So our experience at Stanford is actually working with many European universities, and we produce for the country of Poland, the Ministry of Science and Higher Education, the Top 500 program. And it hits on what Joseph said, the notion that you have unbelievably great capacity in PhDs in Europe, but often they sort of move to impact, societal impact versus research in ivory tower is missing. So Stanford built a program for the Ministry of Science and Higher Education to deliver the top 500, the best PhDs, so that they might understand a little bit of flavor of Silicon Valley and think about impact. Because I think that's what will make I think unlock incredible potential in Europe and with European universities.
Thank you very much. So we have focus on impact, which is, I think, something that echoes what Joseph said, also focus on challenges, and then Céline about framing things within the Agenda 2030 context. So I have two final questions I want to throw at you, and then I'll ask people to just pick whichever one you want and make it super quick. So the first one is, who at the universities will make universities become leaders of system transformation towards a sustainable future? Is it the students? Is it the early career researchers? And why have they not done it before, as we all agreed system transformation is needed for people, planet, and prosperity? So that's the first question. And the second question, which is, so it's the question about, you know, who will drive this transformation and make universities leaders of system transformation. And then the other question is, whether one of the person in the audience wonders if we have enough pedagogy and didactic material to design good online courses. So two very different questions, and please pick one of them and I'll just do a final round. And if there's anything else you want to, like a buzzword you want to send with us on the way home, then please, because this is going to be your last chance. So we have 1 minute each. Who would like to start? Franziska.
Two very good questions. I have no idea which one I would pick, but I think I'll start with the last one. Yes, we do have enough pedagogy and didactic material, sorry about that, to design good online courses. We already have. And most of all, we have teachers. We have people who want to design good online courses. I haven't done a single course in my university still where I didn't Google something or find something on YouTube, someone who could explain it better. So yes, there are very good material out there for people to understand everything better. Like Paul said, you can literally Google anything right now, and you can have a deep understanding of it in like 2 weeks. So yes, we do.
Thank you, Francisca. Thank you. Josep, would you like
to? In terms of the university, who, at the end, we can say the president of the university. He is the more important person. But this is not about the president or the vice chancellor. It's about know where to go, is how to go. And perhaps the good thing is how to create an empowerment system that the students, professors can really do things that can impact, but not alone. That's the reason why talking with Celine was talking about the relation with industry, because this is not about the strategic plan of the university, the strategic plan of the society. Let me tell you that, for instance, I have been advising countries like Porto Alegre. You know, the city of Porto Alegre is now creating a platform with all the universities in the city, all the industry and the government, thinking about where to go together. That's the point, that perhaps we don't have tools for creating backup innovation. Sorry. Good.
Thank you, Josep. Celine.
Well, I think in terms of who, in any human ecosystem, you have change makers and you have those who are resisting change. And I think you would need to have a selection of both the faculty and the students, and you need to enable those change makers to actually tip the balance within the university ecosystem. And that would be the role of probably, the leadership to allow for this to happen. It's really to empower the change makers wherever they are within that ecosystem, and that end up tipping the system at some point. And then the others just need to adapt.
Thank you. Those are very clear words. Paul, please go ahead.
Who's driving change at universities? Universities are like giant oil tankers. They have had literally a millennia to figure out and maintain the straight trajectory. I think it's incumbent on universities with leadership to empower little speedboats to go out and explore the future state, to try new and different things. And those speedboats come back to the big oil tanker and try to inject some of the new flavor, the change, so that the oil tanker can move in different directions and try different things. I think it's incumbent on universities to enable these speedboats, units like ours, to go out and talk to industry, and also to incorporate those changes as the speedboats come in and deliver the fruit and fresh vegetables.
Thank you so much. I think we've managed to produce a lot of food for thought. I will not try to summarize this discussion, but my takeaway is that I think we all agree on the continued importance of what academia represents and what it potentially provides. I think Paul made a relevant point, and all of you have made it, that, universities no longer have, or never did have, a monopoly on knowledge or learning. And I think that's something we should all bear in mind, that going forward, we're sort of entering uncharted territory, but it provides a huge opportunity to send out the speedboats, as Paul said. And actually, given that universities are not known for being the most agile organizations, perhaps this crisis will make us more miss and long for the return of these speedboats in order to help us oil tankers move forward. Maybe that's what I would like to leave us with. So a note of hope that this is an opportunity, and also the positive thing that Celine started with, that there is a huge demand for learning and academic and knowledge, and for providing long-term visions and thinking. So with that hopefully hopeful note, I would like to thank you all for joining this panel. I hope it was useful, and Hope to see you in another context. Thank you.
Bye-bye, thank you. And thanks to the audience.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Arrivederci.
everyone.
Au revoir.
I guess I was over punctual.